Hi, and welcome to the Pit Lane, a Formula One podcast where we talk about everything Formula One. We head to Spain for the third part of this European triple header. Off the back of a stellar win in Monaco, will Norris have what it takes to conquer the Barcelona circuit, or will another McLaren driver fight for the win? Will Max steal another victory? Will other teams find a pace with their new front wing regulations? This is the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix. I am your host, Jordan Wynn, and alongside me is my co-host, Alden Kwell. How are you doing this week, Alden? It's been a while.
Been a while, Jordan. I'm doing very good. I'm very glad to be back, and we picked the best race to pick up, didn't we?
Yeah, we've both been pretty busy, but we're pretty excited to talk about Barcelona and the Spanish Grand Prix, which every once in a while gets us a good race, and here we are with what we got was a good one toward the end. But we'll talk about some news first. We have a technical directive that went into effect for this Grand Prix, which was stated in the offseason that it would go into effect this weekend. And it put new limits on how much the front wings are allowed to bend under load. This came from more of a protest from Red Bull, I believe, initially, that it was believed that McLaren had the most luck exploiting the amount of flex on the quote-unquote old wings before coming in this Grand Prix. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the weekend went.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of teams were preparing for this. They had the time to prepare throughout the season and off season, based on the technical directive, knowing when it would go in place. So yeah, we'll see who, if there was a shakeup of the order because of this after this weekend. But yeah, a lot of teams were running new front wings.
Let's dive right into the practice sessions. And piggybacking off of that, McLaren was fastest in all three practice sessions. So the flexi wings were no longer, but the McLarens were still fastest in all three sessions. Both Piastri and Norris, I believe, took a practice, what do you call it, P1 in practice, in one of the practice sessions. But yeah, that didn't really seem to affect them going into the practice sessions.
Yeah, I think what was interesting, the Barcelona circuit is probably the circuit that the teams have the most data on because it was the old testing circuit. This in Bahrain, they have the most data. So setups are probably less divergent here. People know kind of what they need to do. Maybe on a year by year basis, they might have some differences, but they kind of know the general feel for what they want to do, given that the circuit layout hasn't changed all that much. But like there isn't that many straights. It's a MotoGP circuit, so there's a lot of the circuit's kind of designed for motorcycles. It's not really custom suited to an F1 car. So we'll see if the technical directive kind of impacts some of the other circuits. I feel like maybe it could, given that this one maybe has the least impact on the cars. But yeah, I'm interested to kind of hear more about what you think. Do you think this is settled, given that McLaren kind of was fastest in the first three practice sessions, or do you think that there's still some opportunity for other teams to sort of settle, find some pace?
I do think there's still opportunities going forward, kind of like you said. It's kind of a more of a MotoGP circuit, so there's no kind of one type of corner here. I know there's a nice variety, but there's other circuits that are kind of more of one's more high-speed corners, one's more mid-speed, one's more low-speed, which obviously makes the wings flex more or less, or more variably depending on what type of corners there are. So I think will probably be other circuits that might impact it more. But with McLaren being fastest in all three sessions, it still shows that it's clearly probably the most balanced car and probably still the quickest car on the grid. But that doesn't mean some of these other circuits might give them more problems than some other cars will.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks.
Yeah. Albon gave a seat up to Victor Martins, and for FP1, and Rio Hirakawa was in Ocon's Haas for FP1 as well. There was quote-unquote a new livery again for Sauber this weekend. I feel like they've been doing that. It's like the third or fourth one already, and it's just a different splash of green pattern on their black. Thumbs up or thumbs down? Neutral.
For me, it's a thumbs up. I think the base livery is kind of uninspiring. But this one kind of coinciding with some upgrades that they brought kind of seemed to work well for their car. I don't know, like it seemed more interesting to me, this livery, than their normal one. So anything to spice it up, I think, kind of helps.
Yeah, I think it would look good, feel good. So maybe that's what it did this weekend for him. Really helped him out once we get into the results here of the weekend. Let's get into qualifying. The big surprises this weekend that were out in Q1 were Tsunoda and Carlos Sainz. Tsunoda was P20 on merit, which is not a good sign for that Red Bull. Colapinto had an issue at the pit lane. I believe he parked at the end of the pit lane and couldn't move, or whatever was happening. And once he said on the radio, Carlos Sainz just drove past him out of the end of the pit lane. And he ended the session in the grass later on. So there's that. Nico Hulkenberg was also out. Esteban Ocon, and like I said, Colapinto as well were out of Q1, with Piastri going fastest and Verstappen only 2.5 tenths behind.
Yeah, it was kind of an uneventful session aside from the sort of pit lane exit issue with Colapinto. I think there was some confusion with a lot of drivers. They didn't know why he wasn't going, and they were kind of unsure if they could pass him, but it was very clear that Colapinto had an issue, so everyone was just able to pass him. But that could have been a little bit more dicey, I think, for some of the drivers if that wasn't the case, or if there had been some issues there.
Q2, Alex Albon, Bortoleto, Lawson, Lance Stroll, and Bierman. Piastri was fastest again in Q2. Lando Norris less than a tenth behind at the end of Q2. And Lance Stroll, do we think he had an issue, or are we discussing his hand situation?
Yeah, so Stroll was eliminated at the end of Q2, and he missed his weigh-in at the end. He kind of, I think they said that he went and did some other things in the garage before going directly to the weigh-in. I think the rules dictate that the driver, if they're eliminated, once they're eliminated from qualifying or finish qualifying, must report to the FIA driver weigh-in immediately. This sort of tracks them for a number of things, but also helps them deduct their weight from the weight of the car. So it's that there's a regulatory issue. But it sounds, I think there were some conflicting reports over the weekend. One set of reports kind of made it sound like he was being a crybaby, and that he kind of had a tantrum in the garage. He wasn't pleased with his qualifying performance, so he was swearing up and down the garage, throwing stuff around, insulting people, and then eventually went to the weigh-in. I think there's another set of reports that seem to indicate that he's sort of managing and dealing with a hand injury that stems from his bicycle incident at the beginning of the 2023 season. And that because of this incredible amount of pain that he was dealing with this weekend, he dealt with that before reporting to the weigh-in. And the reason why he feels that he's been underperforming, again, in his own words, is that it stems from this injury. And so he's kind of mad at himself, sort of, down on himself. I don't know which one to believe. I tend to lean more towards that he's dealing with an injury, because I think there's been a lot of sort of backtracking from some of the other initial reports that he was having a tantrum. And yeah, I think some of the other race engineers or mechanics on his team kind of indicated that he wasn't having a tantrum. He wasn't sort of throwing things around or insulting anyone. So I tend to lean more towards he's dealing with a legitimate issue. And we may get to it later. I guess maybe this is the best place, but he will miss the Canadian Grand Prix as a result of sort of
He's gonna miss it?
Dealing with this. He's going to miss it.
Oh, when did that come out?
I think they announced it on either Sunday before the race.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought I saw who was their backup?
Drogovic.
Yeah, I thought he was going to. There's someone had a picture of him going to Le Mans this week or next week.
Yes. No, you're totally right. So initially, provided that Lance Stroll was going to race in Canada, of course he would. He's Canadian. Why would he miss it? Felipe Drogovic was supposed to be at Le Mans. He's the reserve driver. So why, Lance is never going to miss Canada. He'll do whatever he can to go there. But because Lance Stroll is also going to withdraw from that, and I think he went immediately into surgery again. I think there were some reports that he was getting sort of a fix to his wrist surgery. Mm-hmm. He may have sort of rushed his return, but Felipe Drogovic is no, I'll give up my seat at Le Mans And yeah, I just looking at this, Felipe Drogovic is on the road to Le Mans, suggesting at present his reserve services are not required. Okay, well, so maybe things are changing. I thought Lance Stroll was not going to make it to Canada. I think that was initially what I saw, but
Yeah.
It would be weird for him to miss it, but
yeah, but at the same time, if he's getting stuff repaired, cleaned out, or whatever, and then going back a week and a half later is probably not the best idea after you just rushed your other one. So, but I guess I don't know. I'll see what happens. I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat as you as well. I think it's probably more of a pain issue because it sounds like he's been dealing with it for the past like 6 weeks or something. They mentioned, so maybe he had some sort of flare up or something happened in between, or just overuse at the beginning of the season. Who knows? But he's been doing well in the races for the most part too. So he's scoring points and whatnot. So it hasn't been. I mean, it's clearly bothering him if this is the case, but he's been hiding it fairly well, I would think, if that's the case.
Certainly.
Which I know a lot of these drivers do anyways, but still, I think I'm on the same boat as you here that it's probably more of a pain thing. Maybe he was cussing in the back room or whatever, but it could be just due to pain and frustration dealing with it anyhow. So,
yeah, he hasn't scored points since the Miami Sprint.
Okay.
And he hasn't scored points in a Grand Prix since China.
Okay.
But he does have more points than Fernando, who's had a very tough time of it. So yeah, he's the leading Aston Martin, to be fair.
Take it for what it's worth. Alonso's had a lot of unlucky stuff happen to him too last few races, but
also true.
But yeah, so that's kind of Lance Stroll saga. We'll see if he ends up in Canada or not, I guess. But yeah, we hopefully see him there. If not, hopefully Felipe Drogovic, I guess, ditches Le Mans for F1. I don't. I mean, I think he wants to get a seat. He's been the reserve driver for like 3 years or something crazy. So
seems about right.
It might be. I think he should take it if this is his one chance to get in the F1 car. He should do it, but we'll see what happens. Let's go to Q3. Piastri took pole, I think, on his last lap. I think he went purple in all sectors, and he gapped Norris by over 0.2. And I believe that was the largest qualifying gap between P1 and P2 this season. So Piastri kind of making a statement there. Max and Russell, they had the same exact time, down to the thousandths, but Max took the spot for third place because he set it just before Russell did. Interesting to note here that Charles Leclerc did not set a second lap time like everybody else, instead choosing to set a soft for the race. So he has a new set for that. Gasly has 5 Q3 appearances this year, a second most for a driver not in a top 4 team. And Alonso was 10th for his home race. And I believe Lewis Hamilton was 4th, right? Was he? Or was
at qualifying?
Russell
he was. Russell was 4th. Hamilton was 5th.
That's right. Okay, so yeah, Piastri with the dominant pole position this year for the first time this year. Dominant.
Yeah, he was fastest in Q1, Q2, Q3. Fastest in 2 of the 3 practice sessions. Dude is on fire. He kind of dominated the practice and qualifying, without a doubt.
Yeah. Let's get into the race. How should we do this? Should we just start with Oscar Piastri and then work our way down from there, probably?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Start of the race, Oscar Piastri gets into turn 1, has a good start, and drives away, essentially. He has to hold off for one safety car, and he was never really never in threat by anybody, as Lando Norris ended up P3 after the start and kind of stuck behind Max right away. Piastri was able to drive away from Max. He had one safety car restart he had to deal with and handled that very well. And yeah, just drove away and won the race in a dominant fashion, I would say.
Yeah, I think there was I think Verstappen kind of got a little close on lap like 2, 3, 4, but quickly dropped off trying to save his tires. He just was on a different strategy. But yeah, Piastri honestly just drove away with it. He was in the lead, I think, pretty much the whole time, with the exception of some pit stops. But dude was on fire all weekend. He dominated.
Yeah, and this is what, his fourth or fifth win this year? Is it five?
Fifth win.
So yeah, that's pretty impressive. I think I saw a stat that he's one of three McLaren drivers to have like 8 straight podiums. The other ones are Ayrton Senna and Lewis Hamilton, so take that for what it's worth. But yeah, Oscar Piastri, dominant race, dominant victory, extends his lead up to 10 points now, in front of his teammate Lando Norris, who ended up taking P2 in this race. He had a bad start. Max got by him at the beginning. Max, I believe, was he on his outside? And yeah, got by him, but then a few laps, kind of toward the end of the first stint, he was able to get by Max Verstappen, and at that point, he kind of drove away, but Max came back with a 3-stop, was their plan, was Red Bull's plan. So it kind of made things interesting that Max was kind of catching back up to Norris kind of toward the end before the safety car came out. But yeah, in the end, Norris ends up taking P2 relatively comfortably in the end. So another solid McLaren 1-2 to show their dominance, even with these flexi wing regulations being tightened up.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head there, Jordan. I don't know if it's circuit specific or, some other factors playing into this, but it seems that the technical directive didn't really do much. McLaren finished 1-2, and no one else really seemed to have much pace.
Yeah, not in comparison.
Not really, no.
If Max was on the same strategy, he wouldn't have been able to hold on like he did, I don't think. So, but yeah, let's move on to third place. This is where things get a little bit interesting. Charles Leclerc ends up P3 on the day. So we had a safety car restart on about lap 59 or so?
Yeah, 59 or 60 thereabouts.
Yeah, so we had a safety car restart because of Kimi Antonelli. He lost power after the back straight or whatever. I forget what turn that is. Lost power there, stuck in the gravel. Car to get retrieved, so we had a safety car. And on the restart, Max had a huge tank slapper after putting in a set of hard tires, where pretty much everybody else was on a set of softs. Even if they were used, Max was on a brand new set of hards. He got a little wide getting onto the main straight, got a little bit of curb, and somehow saved it. I think I was more impressed by the save than anything else at that point, because I thought he was going to lose it. Charles Leclerc tucks in right behind them, gets on his inside. They briefly touch, and Charles Leclerc gets by him, and ends up driving away from Max at that point. But up behind him, George Russell tucked in right behind Charles Leclerc and gave Max Verstappen a little nudge. I think Russell got a little loose, maybe getting into turn one. Everybody had cold tires, and Max got bumped a little bit, ended up going wide, had to take the escape route, and Max continued on in front of Russell at that point. And then his team told him to give the position back. And this is where things
get a little
dicey. Yes.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So was it the same lap that he gave the position up, or was it the next lap?
I think it was the next one.
So, yeah, getting in the next lap, Max listens to his team. They told him to give the position back to Russell because he took the off-road or the escape road and stayed ahead. And he does that and then immediately gets back on the accelerator while he's still next to George. And to me, it looks like he intentionally drove into him or misjudged, per se, the corner and gave Russell a nice little love tap, banging wheels together. And yeah, took the position away from Russell at that point and got a 10-second penalty for doing so, and gave the position back to George Russell.
Yeah, that was a crazy turn of events. I think, first off, like you said, Verstappen had an incredible save out of the last corner down the straight on the restart. I think Charles did everything right. He drove perfectly well. He passed him on merit. I think Max can be too upset about that, aside from being upset at himself. The Russell thing seemed really weird. Russell was kind of right there. I think Russell and Max had contact, and I think you might call it perhaps Russell's fault that they had contact, or maybe just like a racing incident. They're both fighting for the position, but Russell was definitely behind because I think it was his front wheel to Max's rear wheel. I don't think that really matters, but Max went, off because Charles Leclerc was also kind of right there. So I think Max did the right thing, but I don't think his team should have told him to give back the position. And I think that's by and large agreed upon out in the media.
The FIA agreed too. So
yeah. And then all of a sudden, when he is told to give up the position to George, he just drives right into him, purposefully or not. George's steering is consistent and he's passing him right. I don't know, is that turn 5 or something? But Max just drove right into him. It's very clear. I think, Nico Rosberg on the world feed said it best. I don't need to see it again. He just drove right into him.
Yep.
And honestly, 10-second penalty, I think, is a very lenient penalty for this incident. Purposely driving into someone should be grounds for disqualification. That's my view. I think there's history for that. Although I think most recently when Vettel did it under the safety car in Baku, he was given a 10-second stop and go.
Yep.
That's so
correct. Yep.
Not disqualification, but basically I think he ended up last after that. This 10-second penalty is not a 10-second stop and go. So Max got off pretty well here. He only got 3 penalties on his license. He's 1 away from an automatic race ban. I think his next set of penalty points expires at the end of June. So he's not going to be sort of quote unquote in trouble for a while, but yeah, absurd, crazy, dramatic, I think are the words you might use to describe the whole situation, considering that also Verstappen and Russell have this little sort of tiff going on dating back to last year. So I don't know. Russell, I think, handled it pretty well, but yeah, this is he should have been disqualified in my book. But
yeah, it was a little wild. Definitely, I think it cost himself whatever hope he had at a championship, assuming things even things level out. I don't see him coming back from this far away with the form that McLaren's in right now. Especially with the 2026 regulations coming up, it's hard to want to continue to develop a car the entire season when you have those regulations coming up. So I think that really killed his chances, or whatever chances he had, because he needs every point he can get right now. He lost 9 points because of that, potentially, maybe more, if he could have gotten by Russell again. But yeah, so let's go back to what happened here. Charles Leclerc ended up P3. After the restart, George Russell got P4, and Max ended up P10 with a time penalty. Ended up getting 1 point in the end, just ahead of Lawson. But yeah, it was crazy set of events. If there's something you want to watch about that race, just watch the last 7 laps, and you'll get all the entertainment you need. But yeah, the other Mercedes, we said, Antonelli, DNF. He lost power, which brought out the safety car. Lewis Hamilton ends up P6 today. Or on the day. He said it was maybe the worst the cars felt all season for him. He was quite a ways down the road before the safety car from Charles. He was quite a ways from him in Monaco as well. I think he was 50 seconds behind or something, his teammate, which is crazy. Hamilton also started in front of Leclerc, so that's another hit to his probably confidence in the car. And he also got passed by Hulkenberg on merit. Granted, Hulkenberg had a brand new set of softs and Lewis didn't, so take that. But yeah, getting passed by a Sauber, which had minimal points coming in this race, is not ideal, but great for Sauber. So in that, Nico Hulkenberg, P5 with the safety car restart. They had a really good weekend, and Bortoletto, his best finish of the season with a P12.
Yeah. Again, everyone's out of order here. This is kind of just crazy. The safety car kind of really threw a wrench into the race. Just to loop back to Ferrari, they're now in second place in the Constructors' Championship. even with that double DNF in China. So Leclerc and Hamilton, even though they've both sort of been sort of, there or thereabouts, kind of on the podium, kind of not on the podium, I just think because Mercedes and Red Bull and a number of other teams just aren't really fighting for it, Ferrari's still in second place. I think that, they would rather be in first, but all the same, still a pretty good season-ish, I suppose. I don't know. But yeah, Sauber, let's go. Nico Hulkenberg, that's awesome. Past Hamilton on merit, like you said. I think there was some tire differential there. With that P5 and the 10 points for Hulkenberg, they're now in 8th place in this Constructors' Championship. I think they passed Alpine and Racing Bulls, or Haas? I don't know. Haas is in 7th or something.
Aston, right?
Aston Martin. There you go. That's the one. Yeah. So yeah, congratulations to Sauber. The weekend that they brought a new livery and some updates to the car. Maybe Hulkenberg's just really gelling with this new sort of setup. Maybe they found something and they're able to really sort of manage it. Maybe the car got a little bit lighter. Maybe they found some weight savings. It's tough to tell. Maybe this is going to be an outlier and we won't see this again. It could be race or track specific. Yeah, but either way, I'm very happy for the team. Hopefully Bortoleto can find some points for himself here in the next couple of races, because that would be a huge stepping stone for him, especially if he wants to be in the car next year when it turns into Audi, which I think he will. But I think just to build on it, his confidence and his pedigree, he would want that.
Yep. I think he's one of 3 drivers who've driven this season that don't have a point yet, I think. I think the other 2 are the Colapinto and Duhan.
With correct. Alonso. That is correct.
Yeah, with Alonso getting points this week. But yeah, Hulkenberg P5, like we said, great for them, great for Sauber. I think it's Hulk's best finish since he was at like Renault, I think. So that's going quite a ways back. What was 2016 or 17 when he was last there?
Wow.
That also says how long Nico's been in the sport, because that wasn't his first team either. But yeah, good for him. Good to see him all the way up there. This takes us to Racing Bulls, who has moved up to 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, passing Haas with Isaac Hadjar in P7. He is having a great season so far. That Racing Bull seems like a really good car to drive. Just ask Yuki, and he'll tell you. But yeah, Isaac Hadjar has scored points in 5 of the 9 races this year, and he's a rookie. So he's doing a great job in a midfield car, getting points in that many races. He's getting the best out of the situation he's in right now.
Yeah, and we can even sort of just let's cut Australia off because he crashed on the formation lap. Who knows if he would have scored points there, but basically scoring points in 5 of your 8 races you actually raced in, that's an insane achievement, considering he was, even while Yuki was there, he was probably the number 2 driver.
Yep.
Congrats. Big ups to Hadjar. Love him. I think he's awesome. So
seems like a great guy too.
Yeah.
So, and then we get to his teammate Liam Lawson, P11, made contact with a few drivers this week. Drove straight into Bierman on lap 31, into turn 1, and I know he had contact in lap 1 as well. Somehow did not take any damage in either incident. But yeah, ends up P11. So a decent weekend for them. Him still trying to get into that car and get points for that team. Alpine, Pierre Gasly with a quiet P8. It's his 2nd points finish of the season, despite a solid qualifying. I don't think I saw him on screen at all, but there he was in P8, getting points this week for Alpine. And his teammate, P15 this week. Yeah, I also didn't see him on screen much either, other than getting lapped by the leaders pretty much. So, yeah, another not great weekend for Colapinto and Alpine.
And I think the questions are starting to swirl whether or not he really should be in the driver's seat, considering that he isn't really driving the car any better than Jack Doohan. I don't really have a dog in the fight. I don't think Doohan did anything to warrant being replaced, but I don't think Colapinto's done anything to warrant staying there either. So yeah, we'll see how that goes, because I think Briatore said he'd have 5 races, and this was the 4th, so 1 more. But yeah, we'll keep our eyes on that going forward.
Yeah. Yep. Like I agree with you. I don't think Doohan should have or had any reason to get kicked out. But I also don't see Colapinto keeping it if we're going by the same requirements Alpine is or Briatore is. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, P9, his first points finish of the year. He's had a lot of unlucky and other issues this year, but he even drove into the gravel this week in the race and still ended up P9. So huge for him at his home race, giving the fans what they want. Some points, especially with Sainz finishing outside of the points. But yeah, Lance Stroll withdrew this race with his biking accident in 2023. I suppose his wrist was still hurting. We talked about that earlier. So yeah, good for Aston Martin, good for Alonso. Red Bull, we talked about Max with a P10. Yuki Tsunoda was P13 on the road, and it's their worst points total for a weekend since Sochi in 2016, the weekend before Max entered the team. That's a stat.
Yeah.
Whoa. So.
Yeah, Max was in P3, P4 up until the last moment, so I don't think it's like that the car is really bad, but when you have a culmination of sort of a tough second driver or a second driver not gelling with the car kind of being very twitchy and iffy, plus a penalty situation, yeah, they're going to have only a single point. That's rough for them, but it's kind of their own fault.
Yep, I agree. Williams, talked about Carlos Sainz finishing outside of the points. He was P14. Alex Albon DNF'd. He had contact with a couple drivers. He had a couple broken front wings. He went in the pits to retire the car. They told him he had a penalty for 10 seconds, so he served that in the pits, went back out, drove one more lap, and then came back in and retired the car on lap 29. So that was interesting, but yeah, didn't want to have a penalty for the next race. And brings us down to Haas, who was kind of nowhere all weekend this weekend. Ocon was P16, and Behrman was P17. And the comments we have is gotten Max way on lap 52 while he and Norris were lapping drivers.
Insane visual. Max was so upset that Behrman got in the way when I think both commentaries, both the Sky feed and the F1 feed, both said it correctly, that Behrman getting in the way of both of them actually helped Max get closer to Norris, but Max was just so furious with the little bit of impediment that Behrman got. It was so funny. It was a very funny visual, especially considering that just a few laps later, Max would, in almost the exact same spot on the circuit, drive into George Russell.
Yep. Oh man, that was pretty funny. Yeah. So yeah, tough weekend for Haas. Should we get into our winners and losers?
Yeah. What do you want? You want to do winners or losers first?
I can do winners first.
Okay.
My winners is McLaren this weekend, with a 1-2 and kind of potentially solidifying their car as still the best car on the grid, even with this quote unquote regulation change. With the front wing flex, I don't know how much more we can talk about it. But yeah, I think McLaren's in a really good spot right now. Obviously, another 1-2, and it just kind of cements their place where they are, and it might be real tough for anybody to catch them this year.
No, you nailed it there, man. McLaren have been dominant. I think they've won just about every race, and the races they haven't won, Max won. Right?
Yep.
So no, they've earned that sort of winner statement there from me. I'm going to go with Nico Hulkenberg, though. I think his P5 finish was not only good for him and the team, but also good for Formula One, seeing a little spice up in the top 10, other teams getting some points. I think this sort of makes it doesn't make the bottom half of the championship standings look so weird with the team. So yeah, I'm happy for Sauber, and I'm also happy for Nico Hulkenberg. I think he's earned it. He's driven very well, and maybe he can get a weird, crazy podium this year.
Be his first
unlikely
ever. Oh,
yeah,
wouldn't that be something?
He was close here, P5. All he needed was F1 to say, you know what, Russell and Leclerc, you also get a penalty.
That's right. Or they just drove everybody off the track, and then
secret agent Max could have done it.
Yeah, see, I just didn't try hard enough. How about your losers?
Yeah, I've got Alex Albon as my loser for the weekend. I think just considering the season he's had so far, this is sort of an outlier of a weekend. I'm choosing my words very carefully because I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong. He was fighting for positions. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3 complex is always where damage is going to occur on the circuit. Williams mentioned before the weekend that they knew that their car was going to be kind of down on the bottom here. They just knew that their car wasn't suited to the circuit. So I wasn't expecting points from Albon, but considering that he ended up finishing or not finishing the race, retired the car early and broke 2 front wings, including the newest front wing that they had for the technical directive, that's just tough. That's going to play on his mind. It's going to play on the team's mind. Someone at the factory's now got to work overtime to get some new wings set up for Canada. They were probably already making backups for Canada. Now they got to make another one. I just think it was a tough weekend for him, considering, I think, with the huge caveat that he's had such a good season so far.
Yeah, it was just the costs involved with it, not just the issue at hand. Yeah, not just the DNF. Yep. No, that makes total sense. My losers, Max, kind of, like I said earlier, I think he may have cost whatever chance he had at a championship with his antics this week and with a P10 finish. Red Bull's in trouble with this situation they're in third now or fourth? So, yeah, it's a tight one for second. Yeah. I think Mercedes are past him now, right? With Russell's finish.
Mercedes is in third now that Ferrari's in second, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, my loser is Max. Did you have anything else you want to talk about this week? I had one thing that I had in my mind about something else coming up.
Okay, let's hear it.
Or we can save it to I'll pitch it to you. Did you hear about the tire selection for Belgium?
No, I did not, but my interest is piqued.
So I can't remember where on the C tire spectrum they are, but the soft and mediums are next to each other, and the hard compound is skipping one. So let's say you're running a C5 and C4, then the hard is on a C2.
Okay, I'm looking at it here. Yeah, the C1 is the hard, and then the medium is a C3. So they have a gap in the selection here.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a huge gap.
Yep.
Is anyone going to want to run the hard?
I don't know. I think they're
this
promoting more pit stops and see strategies and whatnot. So yeah,
I wish they did this more, but I wish it would be more like the soft is the whole step softer and the medium. But anyway, this will be interesting. And then of course it'll rain and we'll never use these.
They'll cancel the race because it'll be too wet.
Yeah.
Oh, don't say it.
Yeah, sorry.
But yeah, I was just curious on your opinions on that.
Well, I didn't even know this. So this is number one. This is huge news. But I wish that they would do this more often and that they would spice up the tire allocation, especially now that tire set choices have been taken away, or like how many sets of each tires have been that decision has been taken away from the teams. That was something that changed in the middle of COVID. But because teams no longer can sort of just put all their eggs in one basket on a certain tire that they think will run well with their car, they are limited by the number of sets they can have. I'm all in favor of Pirelli doing something like this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think we may have talked about it last year, or I know I've thought of like, man, they should just skip a set one way or the other. I'm glad they're doing it. I think it'll be super interesting. I hope it makes a big difference, because that hard tire is going to be a lot slower a lap around that racetrack. So yeah, well,
but it'll also last a lot longer on a very long circuit.
It will, but are you willing to sacrifice 3-4 seconds a lap potentially? Who knows?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
But yeah, something to look forward to when we get over there. But yeah, that's all I have for this week.
Cool. Yeah, same with me. I've got family going to the race in Canada. So we'll have some reporters on the ground telling us what they saw.
Send us some pictures. We can put them
absolutely. We'll bring that back. We'll bring back that information to the podcast. Then I have some friends going to the Belgian Grand Prix later. So we will also get reports on the tire selection.
Perfect.
And we will report back on that as well.
Perfect. I like that. Well, the next race is Canada coming up in a week and a half of this recording. I believe the race is on the 15th. So yeah, thank you for listening to the Pit Lane Formula One podcast, and we hope to see you in a couple of weeks. We'll talk to you later, Alden.
See ya.